All right, so I am going to start up. Let's just take a couple minutes. I will tell you when we get to this point right here, I rewrote this isn't exactly right. So the formula is a little bit different. It's the right stuff. It's just the order is kind of screwed up, but we'll fix it. Okay. So again, it's a console program. We are only going to have to input two pieces of information, a person's height and a person's weight. From there, we will calculate two pieces of information, the person's body mass index and the person's body mass index status. I am assuming that the weight is done in pounds and the height is done in inches. All right. I am going to set up constants, and those constants will be, and these are arbitrary. In other words, I made them up, okay? My minimum height is going to be 12. So I figured that even a preemie is going to be at least a foot in length, all right? And the maximum, I made it bigger than I had to, but I made it 96. That's 8 feet. I think that should handle anybody who's on this earth. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's correct. For weight, I made the minimum a pound, and I made the maximum 777 pounds. It's just a number I grabbed. Where at first it was 666, but then I didn't want to be accused of doing stuff with the devil. So I changed it back, or I changed it to 777. These are the scales, so to speak. So if your BMI is less than 18.5, if it's less than that, you're considered underweight. If it's greater than or equal to 18.5, but less than 25, you're considered optimal weight. All right. If you're greater than 25, but less than 30, you're overweight. And if you're greater than 30, you're considered obese. All right. As it says, I have added these arbitrary values for the minimums. I just mentioned those to you. This program will have looping capabilities in it to allow you to run the program again and again and again. So far, when we've run these things, our console ones, they've been kind of poor in that you run them, they're one and done. This one will not be. So we will validate the height to see that it falls between the minimum and the maximum and the weight. And again, we'll allow the program to run multiple times if the person wants to do that. Finally, and this is going to be new, we're going to do this in a new way. We're going to be using the parse routine. The way that I'm writing it is not exactly the way they show it in the book. So you can look at what I've got, and then you can look at it in the book when we get to that point and decide which one you like better. And if you say the one in the book makes more sense, then by all means, do it exactly the way they've done it in the book. You're never offending me if I give you a way to do something and you don't use it. It's totally fine. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start doing stuff. Main is going to change right here. And what I mean by that is the way that main is going to be written, it's going to be what's referred to as a driver. All right. Those of you who were here last semester may have heard me say this before. I don't know. But I've got a guy that I worked for when I was at the technical college I was at in Wisconsin. I was privileged enough to work for him for about 6 years. The reason I say that is he's the best boss I ever had. He cared about people. You know, he would always come up to me and say, "Hey, I haven't said anything to you lately because you're kind of running around like a chicken without a head, but I'm here if you need me." That's what I needed to hear. Mr. Corrigan is much the same way. He's a terrific guy to work for as well. He really is. But the reason I'm telling you this is this guy, he was the dean of what was called the business division. And there were about a dozen programs under there: accounting, administrative assistant, information technology programming, information technology network specialist, information technology security specialist, etc. All right. Well, I always wondered, and I never asked him because I thought he might find it offensive, but I always wondered, I see you walk around a lot. You have people in your office and you go to meetings, but just exactly what the hell do you do? Because I thought you make a lot more money than I do, and I think I could do what you're doing. All right, if given the chance. But I didn't know. And actually, when he left, a couple people asked me if I was going to apply for his job. But after I found out what he did, I didn't want it at all. The money wouldn't have meant much. It wasn't that much more. But the point is this: when he was hired in, he had an agreement with the school that he had already bought tickets for April of that school year that he was going on a cruise. It was I think it was a cruise, but it was something where he was in another country. And he said, hey, I'm willing to take this job, but I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks during this time. And I want to make sure that's okay with you. He's really upfront with him. And they say, yeah, it's fine. I found out during that 2 weeks what he does, because a lot of the division went to hell. There were things that happened, and we were running to the secretaries, and they were like, I can't authorize that. Only Larry can. Well, where is he? Well, he's out, he's in some other country, and he's given us orders not to even, we didn't have a cell number or anything. They did if there was an emergency, but etc. All right. So again, the reason that I'm trying to go through and tell you this stuff is Maine is like a good supervisor. It's not so much that it does the work, but it delegates authority, in our case, to routines to do the work. So we're going to basically have about 5 different routines that Maine is going to develop, is going to authorize or give authority to. One will be the inputting of the height. One will be the inputting of the weight. One will be actually creating the BMI or calculating the BMI. One will be one will be calculating the status, underweight, overweight, etc. And one will be printing everything out. Does that make sense? Because that's pretty much what Chapter 6 is about, is saying, instead of having a big program with one routine that does this, break them up into little programs. All right? I mean, you want another real-life example? My wife's brother lives in Mississippi. And 2 years ago, she got on a plane, her and her sisters, and they surprised him. I said, boy, I thought that was stupid, because if he had been on vacation, they would have been there. But it worked. She wants to go again this year if we're maskless or if it's better. Okay. It's about a 10-hour drive. At 64 years old, I don't have that in me anymore to go 10 hours. I just don't. The good news is I've got a friend who lives in Nashville, which is about the halfway point. So rather than making a big drive, I'm going to make 2 smaller drives. In just the same way, rather than having one big routine in a main, we're going to have 6 routines or 5 routines, whatever it is. And I'm going to actually get a chance to show you a couple of other things along the way. Now, as we're doing this, I'm not in any hurry, but if something doesn't make sense, you're going to have to say something. All right? I'm not clairvoyant, so, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck or anything else, but if something doesn't make sense, by all means, please ask. All right? The other thing I decided to do to try to make this easier for you is I took all of the constants we're making and all of the variables and I made them global. What that means is we don't have to pass them from routine to routine. And the reason I did that was because we haven't gone over how to do that yet. So I thought I'd make it as simple as possible. All right? So with that said, up at the top of the program, before main, right up at the top here, I'm going to declare about 6 or 7 constants and then about 5 variables. Okay? It's not that you have to do it this way, but most of the time when people do this, you do your constants before your variables. That's just the way that most people do it. So I'm going to put a comment up here that says declare and initialize global constants. And now I'm going to make those. So there are 4 ints and 3 doubles. Const int my min weight, and I'm going to set that equal to 1. All right. We can, if that bothers you, make it height first. I don't care. So we'll say min height. Maybe that's better. All right. So const int max height, and I'm going to set that equal to 96. Const int min weight, and I'm going to set that equal to 1. And const int max weight, and I'm going to set that equal to 777. And again, normally I would write a lot more comments than I'm writing here, but I'm hoping you agree with this. These names are good enough that they really don't need comments. Do I really need a comment on the side of this one that says this is the minimum height? It's called min height. To me that's decent. All right. So I'm gonna create 3 more. These are gonna all be doubles. Const double, and I'm gonna call this min optimal. and I'm going to set that equal to 18.5. If these don't make sense right now, just bear with me. All right? I'm going to make another double, and I'm going to call this max over, and I'm going to set that equal to 25.0. And finally, one more, and I'm going to call this min obese, and I'm going to set that equal to 30.0. All right? And now, take your time, key all that in, but if you can just listen, you don't have to look, but if you can just listen, those last three, over time, you may or may not have heard this, and by no means, you can look at me and I'm no health expert, but over time, these numbers have changed and may change again. All right? These numbers, if we did them for another country, they may be set up differently. There are other countries like Japan, for example, that I've heard is one of the healthier countries. Okay, but the point is, if we decide later, if they say, you know what, an optimal BMI is no longer less than 18.5. It's now less than 20. You with me? Let's just say somebody says that. Then I only have to change that to 20 right here, just in one place. Many people refer to things like constants as they are like a set it and forget it type of thing. All right, and I can use that anywhere I want to use that in my program. Now I'm going to come down and below this, I'm going to say declare and initialize global variables. And there are 5 of these. Now, if you could just pause for a second, no matter where you are, and look up on the screen. Constants are different than variables. Technically, a constant is a special kind of variable. But it's a special kind of variable that once it's been set, cannot be changed in this language. All right, you cannot change it. All right, the reason I'm telling you that is, notice in here a word we haven't talked about yet, and that word is static. All right, in this case, static means there's only one main, and even if I create 100 different routines in here, they're all going to be subservient, so to speak, to the one main. All right, but anything that directly touches main, any variable that directly touches main, not a constant but a variable, has to have the word static with it. Not my rule. This is a rule of the language. So notice if I do this right now, I'm going to say here int height, and I'm just going to set it equal to 0. I don't get an error. You with me? I don't get it. But if I come down here and now I change it and I say height, not buffered height. Notice it didn't even recognize height. Well, I'm going to say it's equal to 63. I'm just making that up. And I've got height in there now. Now notice I get an error. And if I put my mouse over the variable, it says right here, an object reference is required for the non-static field. But if I come back in here and change this to static, now the errors go away. I just wanted to show that to you, why we're doing it that way. All right? So I don't need this line that says height equals 63. I just did that for demonstration purposes. All right, so I'm going to have a height. I'm going to have a weight. I'm going to have a double here for the BMI. And I'm going to have a string, and I'll call this one BMI status. And that's going to be equal to the empty string. So go ahead and put those in. And I'm asking the question, does anyone have any questions on what we've done so far? Is there anything that does not make sense to you?
The last line with constant double is minimum obese, right?
That just says min obese. Yeah. I mean, I could have called this minimum, maximum, etc. After a while, I don't like to make my names huge. They're big enough as it is. All right. And if you don't know this, if you're anal, I typically do this, but I'm not, just to show you it once. After you've set them up like this, you can go back and you can line everything up like little soldiers if you want to. But if you go back to the line and change something in it, it's going to revert back. So it just has one space. All right. So I'm just going to leave that for now, just so you see that like that. Questions? Any other questions? Nothing's off the table. If you got a question on anything, please ask. All right. All right. Am I right in assuming everybody at least has their constants put in here? Yes? All right, then I'm going to move up that far. Now, I'm going to comment the wazoo out of this program because I want you to be able to go back to it, look at it, and figure out what it was. And then the chances are later you'll be like, why did we do this? So my hope is I have a comment in there that explains why we did it. All right. So I'm going to say this is the main program function. It acts as a program driver all right. And again, get as whatever as you want with this. I think I mentioned to you this already. You don't have to do this. I'm going to get rid of it right away. But some people like to come in and do this, you know, put little things around. You can do that if you want to. I used to do all that stuff. And then I realized I was taking probably a good 10 minutes in class playing with aesthetic things that really in the end didn't matter that much. All right. And over time, that all adds up. Okay. So right now, I don't need this console.write line in there. So I'm getting rid of it. I think, did I add my static up here? Yep. Good. I'll want that later. All right. So I'm down here. Now, what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to have main call every other routine. And I'm going to put it into a loop that's going to be what's referred to as an infinite loop. It'll run forever. But in my second routine here, I'll have a way to get out of it. You understand what I'm saying? Now, when you do this, you used to be able to write this. While 1. Just like that. And what that is, just so you know, is it comes in there and basically the system is supposed to say if whatever is in there is anything, all right, it's true. But if you look, I can't do that. It says cannot implicitly convert into bool. Well, I could do a convert. I don't want to do that. I can say, come in here and say while true, but typically people will come in here and say while 1 equal 1. Last time I checked, that's always true. All right. So while 1 equal 1. So this is another way of saying forever. What you're going to notice when we get into chapter 5 is there are a minimum of 3 different loops we're going to talk about. There's what's called a while loop, which you see on the screen right now. There is a do while loop. So rather than checking your condition at the beginning, you check it at the end. And there's what's called a for loop. The for loop is the nicest because it's the least code. So why didn't you use a for loop, Jeff? Because with a for loop, it's called a counting loop. You need to know exactly how many times you're going through it. If you don't know how many times you're going through it, like in this case, you use a while loop or a do while loop. All right, so that's why we're using this. Now, again, get as nuts with this stuff as you want. I'm going to show you this, but I'm going to remove it right away. I used to always come in here and with whatever I did, I would always come in and say begin, and then I'd come in and I'd say end and do it like that. So I'd surround at the curly braces of everything I was doing with comments. And then people started telling me in class, you know, you already write plenty of comments and you're really screwing me up because there's just so much green in here. I said, fine, if that's the case, then I'll remove them. What you're going to see is at virtually the beginning of every routine that we write, we will put a comment in there. Sometimes those are called prologues, all right, just to explain what each routine is about, all right? Now, I'm going to put about 6 or 7 lines of code in here, but I want you to understand that I'm going to put in 2 lines of code and there'll be no problem. Then I'm going to put in 5 more lines of code, and each one of them is going to give me an error. And the reason that each one of them is going to give me an error is because I'm going to call routines I have not yet written. You understand? So don't worry that it's got an error. If it really bugs you, I'll show you how to fix it right away. All right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do this. Yep, we're actually going to put in one of these read lines. The program's going to stop when we start running it. Did you hear me? It's going to stop. You hit a key and boom. Why am I doing that? Because we want to make sure that every time we run this and we put in information for a new person, we can clear the screen. Okay? And if you didn't put that read line in there, it does the last person, boom, it calls clear, and you never see their results. So now you'll see their results. Those 2 lines run with no problem. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are going to give us the errors. Okay, I'm going to call input height. Then I'm going to call input weight. Then I'm going to call calculate BMI. Then I'm going to call calculate BMI status. And finally, I'm going to call display all. Those may not be great names. They all work. All right. Again, if I put my mouse over any of those things with a red on there, it's going to come back and tell me, I don't know what you're doing. Now, one thing, if you look up on the screen, please, even if you're still typing, just for a second, I did not do anything like this. I want to show you something. If I did this, don't type this, but if I type this, height equals input height. Weight equals input weight. We could have done it like that. But if we did it like that, those routines would have had to have returned a value, the height or the weight. Does that make sense to you? But since we made those variables global, we're going to manipulate them inside of those routines. So there's no need to return anything. So our return type on all of these routines is going to be what's called type void. It's void of a return. There is none. All right? So that's why it looks the way that it does. So we're going to come in here and we're going to write input height. Now, I do want you to understand something, or hopefully you'll understand it. When we get done with input height, and it's going to be 20, 30, 40, I don't know. When we get done with it, you're all like, yeah, I got it. We're going to copy the entire thing and paste it right below it and change all the H's in height to W's in weight because they're exactly the same thing. And that'll save us a lot of typing. Just make sure, because this is something that a lot of people fall into, that if you start doing a lot of copy and paste, really look at your code. Because otherwise you're in a height routine, but you're checking for weight or vice versa. And since those variables are global, the program will not notify you of that. If we define the variables in here, if we define those variables, those 5 we just did inside of main, they would be local to main, and we'd have to pass them to the routines. Then that would catch those mistakes. But the way we're doing it now, it will not catch them. All right, so I'll try to make sure I do, and please you do the same. Now, if you look up on the screen here, this is the beginning of main. This is the end of main. Make sense to everybody? So again, a lot of times what people will at least write in here is end main. Again, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. But at least I know what that curly brace goes with. All right? So now I want to come down here and please look up on the screen. Don't worry about typing it for a second. But because I'm going to put a comment in here. But before I do, I'm going to write in here void, because this is wrong right now. Input height. And, oops, I'm going to put in this. Now, notice, I didn't get any errors. However, as soon as I try to use my variables, it's going to complain because I didn't say static void input height. So I have to do that. But before I even do that, I'm going to put in a comment. This function, I don't want to read to you. Okay, so that's my comment. This function lets the user input the height or the word quit to end the program. All right, the height is validated to make sure of two things. One, it's numeric, and two, it is between the min height and the max height. I mean, I could have put here min height and max height too. It's just a comment, so it doesn't matter. The disadvantage of putting in min height, max height is putting it in like this. I see what those numbers are. Otherwise, I have to scroll up if I forget what they are. The disadvantage of putting it in like this is if those change in the future, we get some guy who's 9 feet tall. All right, and I have to change that to 108. Then I got to remember to change the comment. Otherwise, it could be confusing to people. Okay, so you decide. I don't think that's going to happen, so I'm going to leave it the way that it is. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a couple of variables. These variables that I'm going to declare right now are what are referred to as local variables. They're only known inside of this routine. If I want to make them known to other routines, then I have to do what's called pass them to other routines. All right, and you're going to see all that in just a minute. All right, and again, I did this last night. I went and rewrote so much of this, and my names might stink, but they're the ones I used. String, I just call this here HSTR. Instead of height string, I just called it HSTR. And I'm going to set it equal to the empty string, and we're going to have a bool is height numeric. And I'm going to assume that it is. Okay? And again, as a programmer, that's always your call. You can assume that something is true until you prove it false, or you can assume something is false until you prove it true. Kind of like in this country where they always say you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. But if you know anything about the way this country works, that ain't like that anyway. All right? So I could have done it either way. It really and truly does not matter is what I'm telling you here. All right. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, right. And I'm going to say here, please enter a height between, and we want the user to know, you know, again, there's no accounting for human stupidity. I'm sorry, there just is not. So I'm going to put it like this. In fact, I'm going to put that on a new line just so it's easier for you to read. Okay. Give you a second to put that in. Notice I don't have the squigglies where I defined HSTR anymore because I'm using it. It's still gray because I'm not printing it out, but I'm not getting the warning message. So this should come in and say, please enter a height between 12 and 96, then on the next line, or quit to end the program, or now to end the program. Does that make sense to everyone? Questions? And then I'm reading that value in. Remember, that value is read in as a string. Even if I put 72 in there, it's not the number 72, it is the string 72, which has no numeric value. All right? Now, please don't type this, because I'm going to make a change to it. I could say this: if the height string is equal to quit, again, I'm going to make a change to this. The easiest way to quit here is to say environment, you have to know how to spell it, environment.exit 0. Now, the problem with this is, if I type in quit in lowercase, or I use mixed case, it's not going to find it. It's just going to keep going. All right? We don't want that. So we want it to check and take this string that we put in, we want to convert it to uppercase. And that's real simple. I say HSTR dot, and notice when I type in 2 and I type in a U, there's 2 upper. So I just click. I can double click on it if I want. All right? But I'm calling a routine called 2 upper. So that's going to take whatever I typed in, and it's going to convert it to uppercase. If it's a number or a comma, or we don't have to worry about it because you can't convert that to uppercase anyway. But if I write quit with lowercase, it will now make it uppercase. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. And if I want, I didn't do it on here, probably should have. Just put a little comment in here that says, check for program, I don't know, terminate condition, something like that. And again, you are not turning this in. I want you to understand that. You are not turning this in. Put in as many comments as you're comfortable with. I'm giving you a lot of them so you can go back and use this again if you run into trouble along the road. All right? So now if I type in the word quit, it should end the program. Now, just so you see this, if I run this now, it's not going to work because these things have not yet been created. So if you look on the screen, what I'm going to do, see with all these highlighted, I think I've shown you this already, but if I move over here almost right underneath this little search icon and I go 1 over, now, whoops, I thought it was there. No, it is the one right under there. Now I commented those out. You see that? Why did I do that? Because now I can run the program. I have to hit a key and hit enter, I guess. It says, please enter a number. Well, I'm going to type in quit, but I'm going to type it in lowercase. I typed in quit in lowercase. I hit enter, and the program ends. And the reason that I'm taking the time to explain that and do that is, and you probably have all heard me say this, at least you second semester students, don't write several hundred lines of code and then run the program. Write a little code, run it, write a little more code and run it, make sure what you wrote to begin with you didn't break, and keep doing that. That's what good programmers do. Bad programmers write several hundred lines and then run it for the first time, and then realize they've got a boatload of errors. All right? Okay, so we've got that. Now, if we get down to this point, if we get down to right here, right there, what do we know? I'm asking you this question. If we get down to this point, what do we know? We did not type in what? How about we did not type in quit? Does that make sense? Because if we typed in quit, we already stopped. Now, we could have left it blank. We could have typed in hello. All right, those aren't acceptable. We could have typed in a negative number. That's not acceptable. We could have typed in 1,000,000. That's not acceptable. So now we have to go in and we have to start doing our validation. All right? You're going to get another error when you put in this line because we're going to call a routine that we're going to write. And we'll put it right underneath this. All right, just so you can see it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, I'll put a comment in first, and I'm going to say verify that the inputted height was numeric. And is height numeric equals, I'm going to write a routine that's called is numeric. And I'm going to pass that string that we just put in there into it. Again, I'm getting this error. I'm getting that error in here because I have not yet written this routine. We're going to write it in a minute. The error is going to go away. All right? This routine is literally about 6 lines long, and that's including a comment that I put in. So I'm going to put it right below it. Now, I'm going to tell you something. The way that this language works, it could care less the order. You should really have main first, but the order in which you put the routines under it doesn't have to be in order. Does that make sense to everybody, what I've just said? So we're calling in here, what I'm telling you is we don't have to write input height, then input weight, then etc. We don't have to do that. That's the way I'm going to do it. The reason I'm telling you that is right now I'm going to write the is numeric routine. When we get done, I'm going to immediately put the input height, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to put it right below it for input weight. You understand what I'm saying? Because input weight's also going to be calling this same routine. So that's just the way I do it. I have never had a person come up to me. I've had people come up to me who haven't liked maybe what I've written, but there's never been a person in my career as a programmer that's come up and said, I can't follow your code. I've been accused of putting too many comments in. All right. But nobody's ever said, you know, this code is way too easy to read. You know, it's like, okay, so what's your problem? So I'm going to come in here now and I'm going to write this. This is going to say, oh, and this is the first time I get a chance to ask you this. Okay, I'm writing this routine. I'm throwing this value back into here. All right, looking at what kind of variable that is up on top, what kind of value must I return from this routine? A Boolean. So it's got to return true or false. It has to. Otherwise, I'm going to get an error. All right. So I'm going to come down here. I'll put a comment in here that says return true if value passed in was numeric, return false otherwise. Now, to me, you may or may not agree, but to me, that comment says about everything that comment can say. All right. I mean, I have gone through code where I've gone through, I'm not making this up, thousands of lines of code with not one line of comment. All right. And you're sitting there and you're going back and forth. Where'd they define this? Where'd they define? What does this mean? What does this mean? And then instead of giving names like we're making, they name their stuff AA or A, B, C, D. They get to Z and then it's AA, AB, etc. And you're wondering, what the hell does this stuff mean? And I'm not lying to you. I'm not making it up. I'm not sugarcoating it. That's the way it is. You don't want to do that. All right. So I'm going to come in here then, and I'm going to say static again, bool, because it's returning a Boolean, and it's called is numeric. And I'm passing a value into it. Look on the screen. I'm passing this into it. Later, I'm going to pass in one that's called WSTR, because this is the height string. Later, I'm going to pass in the weight string. All right. When I call it in here, I can use the same name or I can make up my own name. So I'm going to make up my own. And I'm going to say here string, and I'm just going to call it input. Now, please look on the screen, everybody. Please look on the screen. I'm going to hit enter and put in my curlies. All right. I still get errors, but now I got 2 of them. And this one says right here, a method name is expected. Well, it's because I should have said is height numeric, not is numeric, sorry. So is height numeric. Now, with is height numeric, all right, now it comes in and it says, well, method name expected. It should have that. Maybe I still spelled it wrong. I don't know. But it's saying, hey, you're never returning a Boolean. So if I were, don't type this in, but if I just said here, return false. See how that went away? All right. So I'm still trying to figure out why it's giving me this one. Bool is height, method name expected. Is height numeric, is height numeric.
Because is height numeric is the name of your variable.
Oh, I gave it the same name. Thank you. All right.
Trying to call that variable.
Right. Thank you. I don't know, what did I call it here? Because it worked here. Yeah, it was is numeric. That's what it should have been. Is just is numeric here. Thank you. And which means that has to be is numeric. And now notice, no errors. Thank you, Gabriel. All right. So I want to do more than this because then it's going to assume it's never numeric. That would be stupid. If I return true, it assumes it always is numeric. That would be stupid. All right. So I'm going to type in this. Let me type in the whole thing because it's literally 2 lines. That's the whole thing. I'll give you a second to type that in. Then I want to explain what's going on in those 2 lines. I'll go till 10:15 and then we'll take another break. Now the code that's right here, this, we've always done that convert. But I already told you when we did that convert.toInt32, if you put hello in there or you left it blank, you were going to get an error. You also get an error if you put pi in there, 3.14 because of the decimal point. It'll blow up. Now we're telling it to try to convert it. And if you can convert it, you will return true. And if you cannot return it, you will return false. All right? That's the way this works. Okay? I mean, until you see it and have used it a few times, it won't make a lot of sense. But now, either when I go in here and I get down to right here, either I put in a number or I haven't. I don't know if it's a valid number or not yet, but I know whether or not it's numeric. Does that make sense to people? That's what I'm more concerned with, is does that part of it make sense? All right. So I'm going back now. I'm back into my input height, back into that routine. And I'm going to put another comment in here that says, if inputted height was not numeric, have the user input it again. I want to make sure. Give me a second here. I run off the wrong one. We'll do it like this. That's fine. Have the user input it again. This isn't the way I wanted to write it, but this is the way we're writing it. All right. So we will write a message here. Non-numeric height inputted. Okay. Put all that in, look up when you're done, and then I want to go over it. this routine has only got about 7 or 8 more lines in it. Okay? Then we'll copy it over and make it a weight one. Then we got a lot of code already in there then. Now, especially for you new people, this line might confuse you. All right? This is a shortcut for writing this. You could have also written the following. If is height numeric equal false. It's the same thing, but it's a lot less typing. They both do the same thing. All I'm telling you is kind of get used to using that exclamation point, because one thing about programmers, I've never met one that got into the field because they like to type. All right. So this right here means exactly the same thing as this right here. This means that if we did our numeric check and it came back and it said false, we're going to give a message that says, and maybe I'll put a blank line before that, non-numeric height inputted, and then it'll tell you to do it again. You understand what I'm saying? So it's good. Basically, it's going to ask us to input it again. Now, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run it again. All right. Now, I already checked the quit. I can check that in a minute. All right. But I'm going to type in here, hello. Non-numeric height inputted. Please input a height. Now it's handling non-numeric input. All right. Now I'm going to leave it blank. And I get the same message. Non-numeric height. See that? And again, there's only so much help you can typically give to a user. And if I just kept hitting enter, the program's fat and happy to keep running and to give me that message. It'll keep doing that. All right. And how do you handle that? Well, not on these machines, but if you come into this room and you're in the other program and you've got to log in, I believe it gives you 3 times to log in, and if you can't, it locks you out. You could do something like that if they continuously put in bad values, if you wanted to do that. All right. So this is my if. So if that condition is true, I want to do this. You with me? All right. But if it's not, I do what's called an else. So it means that either I do what's in here or I do what's in here. I cannot do both. When you've got an if and an else, you either do it or you don't do it. That's it. Now, again, I think I maybe even gave you this one of the first days of class, but it's like we're going down the road. The road ends. You can't go backwards. That's what we've got right now. There's your if, there's your else. Now, if you've got more than 2 paths, you can put an else if, and you can have as many of those as you want. If you've got 1 or more else ifs, you don't have to put a final else in there. Most people do. It's a catch-all case. All right. So what do we know if we get in here? All right. Well, I'm going to put a comment up here, even though we really don't have to. I'm going to say a numeric value was inputted. Now you must verify that the inputted value was in range. Oops. If it is not within range, have them re-enter. All right. Again, I'm just trying to put some English-like comments in here so you can tell exactly what's happening. All right. Now I can come in here and do this. Look on the screen, please. I'm going to say here height equals HSTR dot convert. Remember this? Convert. Oops. Yeah, it is good. Dot. Where am I? Equals convert dot to int of HSTR. Now I know that cannot fail because we already handled it earlier. That will not fail. All right, the way that it's currently written. Not that it's written that great. All right. But now I can come in here and say this. If the height is less than the minimum height, or the height is greater than the maximum height, all right, if either one of those are true, we know that it's not within range. Now, look on the screen, please. Even no matter where you are, please just stop for a second and look on the screen. We don't want to say non-numeric height, because that'd probably be confusing to the person. But now we're going to say out of range height inputted and ask them to do it again. And the good news is, if this wasn't true, it's a valid height, so we're done. So let's go back and, for lack of better words, go through this whole thing just so you see it. Even if you're typing, I'll come right back to this in a minute, but I want to take it from the top here. All right, this is input height. This is our height string. So that's what we enter in from the keyboard when we're asked to input a height. This is going to be a flag, a Boolean flag, that says, yeah, what we entered in was numeric, or no, it's not numeric. So we come in here and we say, please enter a height that's between 12 and 96, or the word quit to end the program. Whatever they enter in at then, it gets stuck into that HSTR variable. We immediately check to see if what they put in is quit, and we convert it to uppercase, just in case they didn't put it in uppercase, because they're human. And if that's the case, this is called a normal exit. 0 means typically normal termination. If there was a problem, like a machine problem or whatever, you typically return a negative number. Back in the olden days, like, when I was your age, okay, then what happened was they typically had a computer operator that would literally watch for things like that to happen. And when there were negative numbers, they knew there was a problem and they knew who to contact. All right. So then we verified that indeed the number height we put in was numeric. So we call that is numeric, which came in here and just said basically try to parse that input. If you can, return true. If you cannot, return false. And it's int because what is height? Height is an int. If we had been trying to, if height was a double, that'd be double.try parse. Does that make sense to you? All right. So all we're guaranteeing here is we're returning true if you put in a whole number. We're returning false if you did not. The range for a 32-bit int, I mentioned this the other day, is -2 billion with a B plus to +2 billion with a B. So we're just making sure it falls within that range. That's it. If it does, we return true. If it does not, we return false. That's it. All right. So we come down to here. We check that. If it did not return true, so here it returned false, we give them a message. Hey, you input in a non-numeric height, and we ask you to do it again by calling that routine. So that routine is literally calling itself. All right. If we get down to here, we know you put in a number, but we don't know if it's a valid number. So if we get down this far, now we convert the number so it actually is an integer. We throw it into height, and now we validate that we say if it's less than 12 or it's greater than 96, we give them a different message, out of range, and we again ask them to do it again. If we get down to here, there's no else. If we get down to there, height's holding a valid number. I'm not asking you that, I'm telling you that. So now what we've done is we have written this entire routine here, all right, to input our height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at this comment that for me is on line 88. I'm going to drag down with my mouse all the way to the bottom of this routine. which is line 132. So pretty close to 50 lines, 45 to 50 lines. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to hit enter a couple times, and I'm going to paste it back in. It's going to give me errors. Why? Now I want to go back and I want to change this so that instead of it saying input height, and now I'm getting that error where I didn't before. I want to come down to the bottom of this, and now I've got to change this to input weight. Does that make sense to everyone? So I now have two routines that look alike. There's my height. I got to get down to the bottom of it. And this, now I'm going to start coming in and manually changing. Now I'm not going to enter quit because I'm not going to let you quit here. So I'm going to say this function lets the user enter the weight, period. Whoops, try that again. Enter the weight, period. Then I'm just going to say the weight is validated to make sure that it is numeric and it is within range. Now the range is 1 to 777. Does that make sense to everyone? And now I'm going to come in here and start changing these. Notice as soon as I make that a W, boom, that error went away. Look on the screen, everybody, please. If I go down to the bottom here, I had an error there before. So before I had this, I had that H in there, and I had an error. Now notice, it's showing me, hey, you got an error it doesn't understand. It says, hey, you've already got something called that, and it's confused. You know, I've always said this. You might laugh at this, but if you're not married, you'll understand after you get married, if you do. And arguing with a computer is like arguing with your spouse. No matter how right you are, you're wrong. That's just the way it is. Because this has the final last word. All right? So as soon as I come back there and make that a W, boom. Everything, as far as I can tell, now looks fine. But I want to start making changes. I'm going to do it slowly. So that now is W string. That's going to be is weight numeric. And that's going to make a lot of errors down here. So please enter a weight that's between the min weight and the max weight. I'm no longer going to say or quit to end the program. I don't want that. All right? So I'm just going to put in a little thing at the end that says now, something like that. Plus now. Something like that. All right? And this becomes WSTR. So notice now if you look down at the bottom, now I'm getting more errors. But every time I change one of those H's to a W, that error will go away. All right? So I'm just going to keep working my way down here. As soon as I'm done, we're taking a break. So is weight numeric, weight string. Here's another one. Weight. I don't need this. Please look on the screen. Get rid of this check for 2 up or equal quit. We're not doing that anymore. So get rid of that. Now it's is weight numeric and W string. If inputted weight was not numeric, have the user input it again. Again, W, 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 W. And you'll notice almost all of my errors on the bottom are now gone. All right? So now I have to check here. This again is a W because it's weight. And that's a W, and that's a W, etc., etc. But go back, take the time to make sure if you did what I did and you put in all of that in there, all right, to make sure that it all works. Now, we're taking a break, but before we do, I'm going to run it one more time. Now I'm going to put in quit just to make sure it still works. Good, I didn't break anything. That's good. Now I'm going to come in here and I want to put in a couple things just to show you. So I'm going to put in here nothing. Now, non-numeric value. That's good. I'm going to put in hello, non-numeric value. Now I'm going to put in something out of range. 1 inch. Out of range. Before it said non-numeric, now it says out of range. You should always check the fringe cases. What do I mean by a fringe case? Remember our range was 12 to 96, with me? So I'm going to check 11. That should be out of range, and it is. I'm going to check 97 to see if it's out of range, and it is. So now I'm going to come in here and put in like 72. All right. Well, it didn't like something. So I got to go back and check my code because it went back and asked me again about heights. Oh, guess what? What didn't I do? Remember how I commented all these out? Now I can uncomment. So if you commented that one, uncomment input weight. And I could run the same checks on the weight. Does what I'm saying make sense to you? Just to be sure, I'm going to save it and run it again. So I'm going to put in valid stuff now. So I'm going to put in here 72, but now I'm going to put in invalid weight in. 0, out of range weight inputted, 778, invalid weight inputted. Now I'll put in 180. And nothing happens here because the program's done as far as it's concerned. The good news is, just if you look on the screen, because we're taking a break, I promise, calculate BMI, 1 line long. Doing the calculate the status, 10 or 15 lines long. Printing it out, about 5 lines long. So what we're going to do is we're going to write that stuff when we get back. All right? And to me, this is, maybe I'm being a little bit dramatic here, and I'm not trying to be, but this is a lot to sink in one period. So rather than going on and doing the GUI one, I'm going to make the rest of the period lab when we get done with this. So we should be done sometime around 11 o'clock. All right. And if anybody at that time, if you fell behind or whatever, and you need a copy of this, I'll print you out a copy. I don't really want to print out. You guys can tell them this if you remember from last semester. I would print out everything, and 2/3 of the time people would just leave it up on their desks. I don't want Mr. Corrigan to get on me about his paper budget. All right. So it is 10:20. Let's take a break. In fact, it's 10:18. So let's come back. Let's make it around 10:33 because that's 15 minutes. All right. We'll finish this up then.
So I fell behind.
Okay.